All right, Keith, to start, we're going to be talking, of course, about Manchester City. Now, what did you make of the news last night that broke? Do you feel that City are prepared to pay huge legal fees to take on the Premier League and this case that sort of just erupted?
Well, first of all, I think we've got to say a big well done to Matt Lawton of the Times, who actually broke that story yesterday afternoon. That seems to be the only information that we've got to actually work on right now, although it was a very detailed story and a great scoop. It seems to be the only information we've got. The clubs and the Premier League, I don't think, have commented fully yet. So,
I mean, Keith, we know that City have a strained relationship with the Premier League. We've discussed that many a time in previous episodes. Given the current charges that they're undergoing and some of the issues, does this legal battle add to the animosity, I should say? What then is going to happen for those cases going forwards?
well, what we've seen now and what came out again yesterday is that the Premier League legal budget has already gone from 5 to 20 million. So, it's gone up by a factor of 4 times, and it's going to go up more and more. And that's what I've always been arguing against, is to try and keep lawyers out of football as much as possible. Our learned friends are just having a field day right now. Man City apparently have now got 4 KCs working on this particular case, which is incredible, with Lord Panic, the granddaddy of them all there, and 3 other major eminent KCs working with them. So it's the legal bills, the distraction, the time, the whole thing that is not really to do with football. And that is what, really irks me more than anything else.
And if City do win the case, Keith, regardless of sort of how it goes, do you think they could add millions and millions to their income by sort of inflating sponsorship deals? What does that mean for them from that perspective?
Well, what it means is that PSR completely is pointless, because if you're saying that you can only spend 85% of your revenue on players, for instance, then you can make your revenue whatever you want it to be. So 85% becomes meaningless, and they can just pour as much money into it as possible, and it just doesn't make sense. And the whole case around, we'll go into the technicalities, but the whole case around this just seems to be about exploding the rules at the moment in the Premier League. Things that have done the Premier League and served them very, very well since 1992 and its formation, the way that the clubs have voted and the way that decisions have been reached, all these things have been very successful and have worked. They've been contentious and there's been a lot of arguments, a lot of things, but in the end, it's worked. And so for City to want to blow all that up just purely for their own greed, and it's not as though they're doing badly right now. I mean, they've won the league 4 times now. It's not as though they're really at the bottom of the heap and they're trying to claw their way up. They're in a pretty dominant position right now, and for them to go this bit further is really galling.
Keith, does City taking legal action against this, does that suggest potentially that previous sponsorship deals have been inflated? Can we read between the lines potentially with that?
Well, certainly, I think this is all about distracting, I think, away from the 115 charges. And it's like, if you don't want to, if you want to attack, then attack the rules as much as attacking the charges and defend your charges. So it's a 2-pronged attack, and it's quite I suppose, a common legal maneuver in some ways, is to just really pile the pressure on. What I think it would mean is, yes, it would mean that they could spend as much as they wanted to. And there's no doubt that would lead to other clubs being completely disadvantaged. There's an interesting point as well. One of the points they've made is they believe it's discriminatory against the Gulf states. And I presume in that they're trying to bring Newcastle into the picture with Saudi. And yet, when I looked at this morning, I thought, well, hang on, let's look at the Gulf states. And Abu Dhabi themselves were listed as having a GDP last year of about 331 billion. Yet Ares, one of the companies invested in Chelsea, have got funds or assets under management of around 428 billion. So it doesn't necessarily mean a Gulf state. It just means a big monolithic type financial institution can be just as big as a country. So I don't see any discrimination against the Gulf in any way, shape, or form. The discrimination really is, are you going to play by the rules or not? Or are you just going to throw your toys out of the pram and just try and buy your way through? And that's not the spirit of the Premier League, and would eventually ruin the Premier League as a sporting festival.
With City, Keith, arguably having the best case season in the world, like we discussed, the best team behind the scenes dealing with this issue. Do you think they could argue that their sponsorship deals actually they should have been worth the most anyway, given the stature and the dominance of the club, as you were suggesting?
Well, again, part of their argument is that it's difficult for clubs in the north to get good sponsorship deals. I don't really understand that at all. But again, that's one of the points in their argument, apparently. I think City, they also argue that they haven't got the sporting heritage to get those great sponsorship deals. So that's restricting them. I don't believe that at all. Manchester City are a famous club with a great tradition and a great history. They've had some great players. And, any club can be attractive to a sponsor. And I just don't get it. But they obviously want a way to put money in. And it does seem to smack of, well, there's some sort of linkage somewhere to these 115 charges. And that's really, it's a two-pronged attack. So it's all to unfold, but it's certainly rocking the ship right now.
Can you go into more depth in that, Keith, about sort of the 115 charges, and equally with the case that's currently going on? What is your prediction for it? Do you think that City will win? Do you think it is going to take, say, the 1 to 2 weeks that they're estimating? What can this mean, and what are the repercussions going forwards?
Well, this is going to be very hard. I don't think they're going to be successful in this new challenge. It's based around the competition law, and I think it would be very hard for the arbitrator to come out and say that the rules that have been in place since 1992 and have functioned very well are anti-competitive. They use this famous phrase of the tyranny of the majority, which is meant to be in the Premier League, 2/3 of the clubs have to vote, and they're saying that the minority are therefore disadvantaged. I just don't get that, because to me, the tyranny of the majority sounds like democracy, and it just seems a very fair way to do it. And it's been proven to be fair over the years. And as I say, it's produced the best league in the world, so it can't be that bad. Is there a moment when competition law is being questioned further, and this could be a time to examine it? Possibly. But I don't think necessarily that the actual arbitrator will find against the Premier League at this stage. So I don't think this is going to be successful, but I do think it will take up more resources, more time, and be a distraction around the other 115 charges that are going to be brought. I think it's actually more than 115, but it's going to be around that sort of area that I think this is being based at. That's my cynical view, is that it's really a distraction and added problems for the Premier League to handle, and more cost, of course, more cost. One other point I would say is that they're saying that the Premier League itself has sponsorship deals, and therefore they're in a conflict because they're competing against the club for sponsors. Again, I just don't see that. I mean, it's for many years, the Premier League is there to run the competition on behalf of the 20 clubs. And what we've seen is they've always had one sponsor for the league, which is a different type of sponsorship and different rights than obviously than a club sponsorship. And that's been enough for the budget to actually, to run the Premier League and to handle the administration and Richard Masters' team to actually do things properly. Now, what we're seeing here is that with the legal costs increasing continually, the sponsorships are going to have to be bigger. So this is actually going to make them come into more conflict potentially. So it's actually City doing, fulfilling their own prophecy here. It's a very dangerous road that they're going down. It's exploding the whole voting system. Now, do they want everything to be unanimous, which would be unworkable? Do they want, I don't know what they want, and that's what is difficult to see here. It really is a very frustrating position to be in. But I think underneath it all, they may well know that this is not going to succeed, but it will be a distraction around the other charges.
And what does it mean, Keith, for the other charges, do you think? Will it have any implications going forwards on that ruling, potentially in months and potentially years to come?
Well, hopefully, given the time that's been, which is one thing we've always moaned about, is the time it's taken to do this, that the Premier League will be fully prepared. And yet, this is definitely going to withdraw, soak up some sort of legal resource and management time. However, they would hope that they're prepared enough to handle those charges. I think what we're seeing is City sort of going to this level and this sort of depth because they really fear that expulsion could be an option if they get found guilty of these 115 charges. So they're throwing everything they possibly can at this. But again, I would ask City fans, and I know many of them, to please, think about this. Don't just have normal blind club loyalty. Think about this and put pressure on your own club, because this is going down the wrong road. It really is, for football in general.